Hello and welcome to another episode of Your Neck of the Woods. My name is Ward 1 candidate Jacob McGregor. As usual, I'm here with my co-host Jason Diodati, and we have another guest candidate for the 2021 Calgary municipal election, Ward 2 candidate Theo Van Besouw. Theo, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. Um, After last year's performance of the city council, I decided to run for Ward 2, which right now has 5 candidates, maybe 6 if the incumbent is running. And my background, I have a professional background. I'm a professional engineer and with an MBA. I have worked in many countries, also have managed many projects, very large multi-million dollar projects. So I kind of understand the concept of contracts, of contract deviations, and change orders and everything. So I understand kind of where the rubber hits the road when it comes to uh, making sure that projects come into in budget. So with my background, I think I can contribute to the new council if elected, and provide some more structure in what is going on in the city council. So with that, perhaps I should say I'm married. I got three children. Children, they're all adults. Also, presently I'm the president of St. Vincent de Paul. That's an organization that feeds people when they are in need. So every given year we help about 20,000 people with food. So I have a kind of an idea about what the under the soft area is underneath society, people that need help. So also in that regard, I think I can contribute some insights.
You made a few interesting points there that lead to a lot of places that we're going to talk about. Let's start with the providing structure to city council. What kind of structure do you think might be missing, and does it have to do with the amount of rhetoric that we're hearing right now?
Well, I think sure, Jacob. The one of the things that I am missing, and I see that as a red thread to the city council over the last few years, is that there's a lack of focus on what is being done and why. So typically, if you go to the private sector, when decisions are made, big decisions are made, they go with the acronym of being SMART. That means specific, measurable, achievable, realistic or relevant, and time bound. So those are the kind of the platform or the crucial parts that have to be in place and discussed whether or not a project should be going ahead. That often I don't see. An example is the latest 200 million innovation for downtown improvements. You get, unless what also can be that the press is very unreliable in giving details, but I could not, for the life of me, I could not find out what's being done, what's the plan, who's responsible, how it's carried out. So here's $200 million being handed out, and we don't know who's responsible, and we don't know what the outcome is. So how can we keep people accountable and responsible for such large amounts?
Well, and in addition to maybe a structure problem, like you've been saying, I would say that also points to a lack of effective communication, like we've talked about before, because there may be those targets, but they're certainly not effectively communicated to people.
And that may be true. So I don't know. So I don't know when something like that is voted upon. What are the criteria, and who's responsible, and who's accountable? So uh, that leaves the taxpayer with the feeling that it's another project, and if it goes off the rails, well, tough luck, kind of thing. So, and that, I don't think they could get away with it when Calgary was booming, but not anymore. Like if you read in the paper that they forecast a massive tax increase in 2023, that is concerning. That is very concerning.
Yeah, and it's definitely harder to have that lack of communication when the economic situation is as dire as we're heading towards. I'm curious what your thoughts are as far as how we bring that clarity in the future, when hopefully you and I are sitting at the council table.
Well, there needs to be a process. In engineering, for projects, we always had what they call an engineering decision record. That is, you state what you want to do, you state what the costs are, you state what the why is being done, you state what the alternatives are, you state what the possible hiccups could be, you state what the alternatives might be, and so you go through a kind of a process that makes things more rational rather than emotional. Because if you start talking about emotional things, then discussions get off track. You got to be focused on what is it what you want, and is it a want or is it a need? For some people, a need is a want, and the other way around. That's fair enough, but that needs to be discussed on a kind of on a professional level. And what I've seen about the name calling lately, that's kind of pathetic.
Well, I was just gonna say that sense of rationality might make it a little easier for council to function as a group instead of fractured body with just name calling and a bunch of individuals constantly at each other.
And Jacob, we've also talked about this before in the idea, and you touched on it as well, Theo, is the idea that there doesn't seem to be a gold standard for process. There is no, like you said, there's no consistency in how these projects are approached. And it touches on another point of yours, Theo, where it almost suggests that it gives them an out, and it gives them an ability to not have to be accountable. Because if that process were in place, there would be the ability for us as constituents and for other members of council to go, okay, well, why have you skipped, step B, D and F? Why are you not following the process that we've set up? And I think that you make a good point that following that, very similar to that, the structure of an engineering process, it makes sense, right? We want to see the entire logistic and the logic that went behind the project.
Yes. So one of the things that's missing, for instance, is a common goal. So right now, the city council is like a cork lost on the ocean and drifts everywhere. But let's say for the next 4 years that everyone agrees that we have to contract reduce the spending by 20%. Make it. Let's make that a goal. Let's say that there's a goal for 20%. Now you have a focus for each and every project that you undertake to measure. You say, okay, is this going to contribute to the 20% reduction? And if not, why should we do it? So now you capture each idea, each initiative with a focus on what your end goal is. And similarly, if the cost cannot be absorbed, then you have to think about, okay, how are we going to inform the taxpayers? Are the taxpayers going to be okay with this spending, overspending? So because it will affect their tax rate base. So there are ways, I think, of focusing on the outcome and keeping that constantly in mind when you're doing, when you approach projects or when you have initiatives.
And I think we haven't attempted that with the municipal development plan, but the goals in there are so broad and wide ranging, not to mention it's really hard to have this global sort of goals document over an entire organizational structure. So maybe a document with fewer and more specific goals would be more helpful.
Well, Jacob, one of the problems that I saw with that document was that it was created by the bureaucracy, not necessarily by city council, and they have handled it very ham-handed. You would say that Calgary is a very large city and has kind of unique neighborhoods, like we all know.
Yeah.
And I would say a document like that should be, it's essential that you consult the grassroots, that you engage the community associations and see what is their take on it. So, for instance, Mackenzie Town in the south has probably completely different set of criteria as Hartlepool to the north.
Absolutely.
So this planning, I'm not quite sure if they can reconcile that. So I see that my vision is that the community associations should have more say, so that they can pick out what they want or what they perceive as a need in their neighborhood compared to the others. And it may not necessarily all be the same. I mean, like take the speed reductions. Some areas might say, well, nah, we like to have more stringent restrictions, and others said, well, no, it's fine as it is. Well, there should be allowance for that.
You and I are very aligned on that. I have always thought that the communities themselves know better what projects will work for them than for some city planner in an office downtown, because they don't necessarily live in that community. So top-down approaches tend to struggle that way.
And not only do they not live there, if they are sampling for or surveying for opinion, generally it's, from what I've noticed in certain areas, it's not representative of the community or those who are most likely to encounter those changes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's well, exactly. So no, they forget for a moment that they are public servants. People in the city are, and that includes the mayor and the councillors, are public servants. That means that they have to cater to a higher authority. And I think they forget that often. They seem to forget that. They say, well, no, we are now positioned to make decisions, and you just have to do what we tell you. That doesn't come over very well.
Yeah, exactly.
So, I'm actually interested. I was reading your website leading up to today, and you talk about how we should have a plebiscite for any project over $1 billion. I can only assume you're referencing the Green Line there. As somebody with an engineering background, for starters, do you want to give me your opinion on that project, and then we'll get into your thoughts on plebiscites?
Well, sure. Hey, one of the problems, Jacob, is not necessarily the concept of having an extensive transit system. That's not. I mean, you go to any big city, Rome, Paris, London, Amsterdam, anywhere, you will see they have a functional transit system. What worries me is that the uh, the staggering amount. So I had a little bit of an email exchange with Jim Gray, I think his name is, and we exchanged some information uh, on big projects. Now, big projects are projects that initially are over 100 million, but there are also projects over a billion. Now, projects over 100 million, there's not one project that has come in on budget. All of them are over, and real projects are 45% over. Now you go to billion-dollar projects, and they are 100% over. So, and that is just the nature of the beast, Jacob. Is that $1 billion, or 5.5 billion dollars?
Yeah.
That is such a huge amount that once the tap is opened, you cannot turn it back. It's just next to impossible to manage that. Now, so what's the impact of the taxpayer? Well, we calculated it out, and it is let's say that the thing can become brought on in budget of 5.5 billion, is highly unlikely. It will affect the taxpayer about $500 a year for 10 years. That's a lot of amount. That's a lot of money. So
Yeah.
So my take on this green line is that everything that I see is cost overrun, tunnels, and difficult area. The other problem that I have is that the city hall they appointed a steering committee about 19.
Yes, the Green Line Committee. Yes.
So what we did not get to hear is how much they get paid, what they're responsible for, and what they are accountable for. So here is would you not like to have a job to be appointed to a committee that has no responsibility and no accountability, just an advisory? So if that thing goes way off track, well, you can always say from now, I'm too busy now, and I'm leaving this committee.
Yeah.
And you take the money and you go to the bank. I mean, this is absurd. This is absolutely absurd that the steering committee is being appointed without responsibility and without accountability.
That's an interesting take, because we've talked about the Green Line many times on the show, because obviously it's a big issue in the election, and we haven't really gotten into the steering committee and their sort of lack of direction or accountability outside of the occasional reports they usually give to council in a closed session that we're not able to see. And we'll talk about those closed sessions too. I don't love them, but nobody's really talking about how much oversight these committees have.
So to make a segue into publicite, the publicite, I think, has a function when the expenditure ultimately affects taxpayers big time, like the Green Line.
Yeah.
And when the mandate runs past the mandate of council. So if you have a project that runs over 4 years and has an impact on taxpayer, I don't think that the council should have a mandate to mortgage their shortcomings to the next council. That's just not fair. So people should go. You should be transparent, and you should say, if they do the right thing, they would on October they would have on the public side, folks, we want to forward the Green Line, but it's going to cost you between $500 and $1,000 a year for 10 years. Are you still into it? Then you give the taxpayer the say of how money is being spent. And I think it's just by the gigantic amount of money that, in that case, plebiscites are justified.
I definitely see the logic. My worry would be that for these projects with long-term timelines, especially that because there's often plans and projects that are begun with longer than a 4-year timeline. So what would you say to the people that argue, one, I elected my counselor to make these sorts of decisions, or two, the idea that if we do this for projects that expensive projects that have a long production cycle, that we're going to end up having way too many plebiscites and costing ourselves more money anyway.
Well, again, $5.5 billion, Jacob. That's right now, that's on $100,000 per linear meter. That is a lot of money. That is a tremendous lot of money.
Absolutely.
Now, assume that it could be doubled. That's going to be $200,000 per linear meter. People need to have some input as to how that is being spent. And also, that's, if you do it that way, then you force the city to be transparent. Because now they cannot say from, oh, sorry, but it's going to be higher than we thought. You're going to say, no, you put a framework for it that where the parameters are spelled out, and you tell the people how much it could cost, minimum or maximum. And then the people have a say in it. And I think that is, I think from when I gathered signatures, I think there's only one person that told me, well, I want to get the councillors to make the decision. The green line is also kind of an oddball. It's an advantage to a section of Calgary, but over 3/4 of Calgary will never see the green line.
Like you and I are pretty well served by the existing lines, the red and the blue line. So this won't really affect us up here in the Northwest, but we still have to pay for it. That's your point, right?
Well, the point is, I think when you look at particularly now when money is not that much available, how can you benefit most people with that amount of money? And I think you will, if you dig a little bit deeper, then you will see that there are many projects that are far more cost effective than putting a green line in there.
I tend to agree in principle with you that there are better ways we can do this. So let's talk about the person you're running to replace. Councillor Magley or Jason, actually, before I do that, do you want to give any thoughts on the topic of green line or the plebiscites?
Well, and I was hoping you'd ask, because I mean, I feel strongly, and Jacob, we've talked about this before, but I feel so strongly and in agreement with you there, Theo, about the idea of plebiscites for projects, especially of capital expenditures over $1 billion. And like you mentioned, there is something to be said about when that project spills over into different terms and mandates, right? And what Jacob and I have always spoken about is the cost, right? And the question becomes, well, if we're talking about a cost of $5.5 billion, then an extra couple 10 million to run this plebiscite probably isn't of large concern in comparison to what we might be, spending unnecessarily. However, I do believe that in the future, and I would love to know your thoughts, or if you do, if you have done any research in this area at all, Theo, and understandably if you haven't, but I do believe that it is time that as a city we start, and hopefully as a province, and eventually hopefully as a country, we look at the existing technologies and emerging technologies in blockchain to be able to facilitate these kind of plebiscites and voting activities in a safe and decentralized manner. Are you familiar with blockchain technology or that kind of newer emerging tech?
Not perhaps in those terms. Like one of the things what we did for our projects in the oil industry, we looked at each project and disseminated them by risk. So you got
Right.
like let's take the Green Line. You got a number of risks that you have to mitigate. The tunnel is probably one of the biggest ones. And
Right.
So if you do that, if you line all the risk and you do that together with the contractors and the people and the engineers that know, and you rank those risks, and you can say, can we mitigate those risks or can we not mitigate those risks? And if you do it that way, then you can more or less box your project in and see where it is going. You also can see whether the risks are, for instance, are kind of getting irresponsible. Like the biggest as an engineer and having quite a bit of experience with tunneling and boring, the biggest risk is the tunneling under the city. I mean, there is not. It is so risky. You can start tunneling, and you have about 90% completed, and then you hit a rock as big as the one that is near Black Diamond. What you're going to do? You can't blast it away. You cannot drill through it. So then you have to start over again, hoping that you not hit the same obstacle. So that is an enormous risk, and it could be enormous. And once you commit to that, and here you see why those projects are always over budget, is because once you committed, you cannot go back. You gotta finish that somehow. So
Right.
So that's what I mean is that it is the very reason, the very fact, I should say, that the Green Line came to us and then was told we cannot do it for that amount of money. We have to cut it in half and add more money to do it, means that they haven't really grasped or never went to the exercise of doing due diligence. I mean, if just compare this to a renovation of your kitchen. If a contractor came in and he said, well, I can do it for $25,000, and he calls back later on and he says, well, I only do half, but it's going to be $50,000. You would be irate.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and rightfully so.
Right.
So that's what I'm looking at, is that you have to be transparent to people and explain to them what the risks are, and at least quantify it in such matter how far it affects the tax base, because I think that's a very important part.
Absolutely. Thank you, Theo. I appreciate that.
Oh, no.
So, speaking of transparency, we're gonna get into a little bit of ethics now as well, because the counselor you're running to replace, Joe Maglioka, ran into some expense issues and eroded some trust that people have in council. What do you think we can do to avoid these problems in the future, and how does city council rebuild the trust that people have lost in them?
Well, I think they have made some changes, but it is sad that it had to be done in the first place. Ethics is something that it's difficult to learn. I mean, it is something that you have to work. People have to be able to trust you, and if you are kind of cheating on little things, then everything becomes kind of on a slippery slope. Like how do we know if you go for an expense account? How do you know that you don't that the council is not going to be catering to to a contractor that gives them a big quality fee or something like that. No, I don't
Special
know.
interest.
Yeah, a special interest, or what is it? Because you are, by virtue of doing this, you show in your character flaw that can be taken as advantage, and sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. You can say, we know now something of you, and you better do this or else, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I would like to think that people who are in council are clear, are clean, and don't have anything to hide, because you cannot. I don't think you can be in a public position to be blackmailed. So I think integrity is very, very important. And once you tarnish that, then is the next step. And I had a little fun writing that thing on my blog about the situation. What it showed absolutely the breakdown of the whole council. Now here, first, one councillor is being caught, fixing the expense account. The next councillor approves it, and then, and then he's got
chain.
Then the ethics commissioner was compromised,
Yeah.
And then you got the mayor, who has ample room to do something about it. He could have said, from a councillor, I want you, not the taxpayer, I want you to go through all your expense account for 4 years, and you justify everything and come back to me, and you give a report on the oath, instead of spending $65,000 for an outside consultant to do that. So I mean, every level has not been responsible, not be accountable, and certainly not their integrity is going down the drain. All of them.
I love hearing that, because you are supposed to hold yourself to a higher standard. You're representing tens of thousands of people, and you're betraying that trust. And you're right, it's not just one person. Everybody has a role to play, or looked at this and didn't do anything. And council has to be better in the future. And I know hearing you that you certainly will hold yourself to that standard.
One of the things I've been thinking about is that they mentioned about the being able to get someone out of his position, and that would have to be then with the kind of a by-election. And I think that needs to be, I haven't thought it through yet, but that needs to be done. If a councillor acts in a way that he clearly violates the obligations that he has, then I think there should be a kind of a mechanism of being recalled.
Right.
I mean, if people start don't trust him anymore, then they should be able to can him, but or her. But be that as it may, the elections are coming up, and people have to make the choice, and there we will see where people stand. If they take things seriously and want the best from the councillors,
well, I'll tell you, Theo, I'm very much in favor of a recall, and I know people that aren't in favor of it will say, well, the people can vote them out in 4 years when their term is over, but that just encourages the behavior more in the future.
Well, that's the thing. So I'm quite sure it's a sad state of affairs if the public doesn't take their democratic duty to vote for the very best that they can get. And I've been kind of telling people more and more, please look at the websites, and please do your investigation and vote the best person. This has to be me, but vote for the best. Please vote for the best person. We cannot limp along with people that that we can't really count on when it.
Jason, do you have any thoughts on recall and sort of the democratic trust crisis that we're in right now?
Well, it's interesting, and it's I think it's a constant struggle and conversation that we've had with many candidates, where it's the idea that there seems to be this permeating culture of divisiveness within and secretivism, if that's even the right word or a word at all. But there's this secretive aspect and divisive aspect of politics that seems to be creeping into more and more local politics, that unfortunately, for those who are not paying as close of attention as they should, believe that that's how things are run, can't be changed, should be run. That is how things are. And like you mentioned, Theo, you must look critically at those that you're bringing in critically when you're using your democratic power of placing a vote. And we've said it many times on the show. It may feel like a singular vote does not impact the overall experience or the overall outcome or result, but it absolutely does. It's those many votes that create. And as silly or as juvenile or as pedestrian as it seems to bring up, it seems as though we've lost sight of that. And so, on that point, I think that both you gentlemen are I've looked at you guys extensively, and I think that you both would be phenomenal that way. But it's something that I think and it doesn't mean that you are the right, person for everyone or for your wards, for every person in your wards, but it means that you please, yes, as Theo has said in that call to action, look at each candidate seriously. Your vote matters and impacts the way the city progresses and grows. And if I hope, and I like to think, but I hope more than anything else, that all Calgarians are on, all have that same goal, which is to make Calgary the best it can possibly be, because we all love the heck out of this city. And so yeah, please vote and please do your research. It means more than you might believe, in this very moment.
And maybe it's, I'm not quite sure if it's done. I would be surprised if it's not done, because nearly every company I work for has a code of conduct, and you have to sign that. And maybe that should be more a public affair, that people stand up and say, okay, they I don't know, swear or whatever to the code of conduct that they will not do anything that they should not be doing.
There is a council code of conduct, but it doesn't really have very much teeth to it. It's another one of those more symbolic documents than anything else. So
and I've always found it fascinating. To your point, Theo, I've always found it fascinating that in professions like the legal profession, lawyers have the bar association, where there are teeth and there is oversight and there is something to be said about if you do not uphold the importance and the best possible advice for your client. If I find it fascinating that we don't have a similar, kind of process or similar group in politics, where there should be investigations if it's deemed as though you are working, in a special interest. And yes, sure, there is bodies for that, but they're not, in my opinion, they're not utilized quite as often as they should be. And it seems as though those who get involved in these kind of behaviors far too often get a pass before anything else. And so I think that yeah, like you said, Jacob, maybe that is something you both can look at should you be elected, is maybe putting a little bit more teeth to that code of conduct, where there are consequences for your behaviors should they detriment the betterment of the city.
Yeah, I mean, when I volunteered for Vince de Paul, I had to go to a police check, and
right.
You also they also have a code of conduct, and you do that with the installation ceremony. So that kind of puts the onus on the individual, that you better have nothing to hide when you exercise your function. And I think just look at the Canadian military right now. We hardly have any generals left.
Right, that's just a gong show right now, and that sort of culture of passing the buck on problems like this seems to be kind of everywhere right now, and it needs to stop.
Well, and I, it kind of, it may be unfair to say that, but it kind of raises the question in the voters' mind for what's going on. Like one councillor is approving the expense account of the other one. Well, what, for me, it raises the question on, does he have something to hide? Does he not want to be too strict because he might be next time he might be called? So it seems to be from they scratch each other's back. It was I kind of lost my faith in the integrity of this whole deal when I saw it coming out, and there was at no point was anyone who claimed responsibility or accountability, and thereby they lost their integrity.
Absolutely. I completely agree there, my friend. So let's get away from the morass of sort of where we are and talk about where we want to go. How do you think we can help encourage innovation and bring more people to the city to do business? You've kind of been everywhere, from the Netherlands to Ontario to Calgary. What would you say attracted you here, and how can we attract more people and encourage innovation in the city?
Well, you have to set audacious goals. Like first of all, you have to. The one of the problems I think Calgary has is that it's unpredictable. Is that you don't know what is going on with the council, and they don't have a clear view of what the future might be. So let's say that we, when a new council sets out by reducing the expenditures of 20%. 10% everyone can do. I mean, that's a no-brainer. Anyone can say 20%, 10%, but 20% you have to do things differently, and it can be done. We have seen it with COVID. The side effect of COVID is that a lot of businesses were doing things differently and more effectively. Now, I hate to bring this up, but I found that
remote work and things like that, right?
Well, I found it out with my speeding ticket. Before COVID, when I had a speeding ticket, I had to go to the courthouse, and you have to stand in line up, and then you have to go through all kinds of rigmaroles of whether this and that, and you go back. Now, after when COVID was in force, I just got a little slip and say, hit this website, and they handle from there. So suddenly, nobody has to go to courthouse. Nobody has to stand there. You don't have all those attendants telling you which line you have to put up. So things can be done differently. And most time, it's sad to say, but most time it takes a crisis to do things differently. We have always done it this way. Therefore, we continue doing this way. But when there is a crisis and you have to do things differently, well, then some people can adapt very well. So
absolutely. And I think this has shown we can definitely reduce bureaucratic costs and processes at the city. Like you said, you don't need 5 staff members if you end up just contesting a ticket over Zoom. You just need the one person and the person with the ticket, so you can figure out cost efficiencies with those other 4 people. Even if you look at what we're doing right now, normally we would have to be in the same room to record this sort of session, and we're able to record and do the show just as well, almost remotely over the Zoom call. So we definitely are gonna learn a lot of ways, and have learned a lot of ways to do things better already. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's that, it will, of course, it will depend on the cooperation of the people within the city. This is not an exercise necessarily to to make massive cuts, but every company is sooner or later in the situation that they are not rightly staffed, and you have to kind of look at it. And the same is with the compensation. The compensation in the past nobody cared because everyone was making a lot of money, but then the situation changes, and in the private industry, uh, uh, the salaries went down substantially. Substantially. Like I talk about people, if they didn't lose a job, they went down by 45%. And they can say, well, yeah, but they were very, very richly compensated before. Yeah, true. That's true. But nevertheless, they had to absorb that reduction, and the all the people that are in the bureaucratic world, in the public sector, don't have to deal with that, and that's not realistic. Everyone, there should be a kind of a ceiling, or there should be kind of a rule that keeps the salaries in line with the economy.
Absolutely. And you and I again bang on right here, because I'm calling for a reduction in pay by 10%. And it probably should be more, but the reason I'm saying 10% is because that's what can actually get done. Because I think for a larger number, it's gonna be a lot harder to convince, let's say 6 other people, because you and I would vote for it, but it's gonna be a lot harder to convince 6 other people to give themselves and others in the administration a larger pay cut. I also want to see an end to the supplementary pension program, and something more like the RRSP matching that again you see in the private sector.
Well, I think if anyone goes into council and proposes a reduction of the cost, that they should be able to set an example, and it's,
Totally.
When people say, well, 20% is too much, well, why? As a public servant, how do you justify your pay as a public servant? How do you justify you making far more than the average in the private sector? So I think, if the council is serious about being fiscal conservative and getting the finances in order, they have to set an example. And if it hurts, very well. So
absolutely agree, my friend. Absolutely agree. Jason, I've talked about compensation very much before, and I've heard we've had an incumbent councillor on here, and we've had other council candidates say you're gonna lose a lot of talent by doing these reductions, but I've actually said the exact same thing you just said, that we have to lead by example.
Yep.
I'm a little bit surprised when they say that they lose a lot of talent. That's a pretty high. They have a pretty high opinion of themselves. The talent has not been shining through the last few years. And matter of fact, the more I see, the more dismal the people come out. So I think we have I think there are far more people now who are motivated to do something different actually serve the city by offering their experience to use. And I think for me, for instance, the compensation is actually not that important. My main importance is what I have to offer.
Absolutely. We want to make things better, right?
Yeah.
That's the plan.
And Jacob and I have it's really funny that you bring that up, because Jacob and I have spoken about that many times. And originally that was my argument, right? Was if you lose the golden egg pension, as you know, I've heard it referred to, or if you lose the you know, what some may see as a very high or as I've heard it said before, the ludicrous pay that public servants seem to receive, you will then lose, you know, the argument is that those who are in the private sector can achieve those, you know, numbers without the sacrifice that comes with public life. However, my new position is what I've come to learn from speaking to all these awesome, you know, incumbents and candidates, is the idea that I don't know if it's the compensation that's really where you're going to see, you know, quote unquote brain drain or a loss of talent. I think right now we are seeing a loss of talent and a loss of interest from those who would serve well, more because of the climate and the politicking that seems to be happening with current regimes. And so I think it matters more about how we treat each other, as we've spoken about, as you know, you know, depending on your perception of that, it matters more how we treat each other, I think, in politics, and how we address each other and our ideas, and how we approach, you know, process, rather than the actual financial gain that is what's losing the talent that is necessary to run these big municipalities and provincial governments and federal governments.
Yeah, you know, and when I look back at my history, when I came to Canada, I was a laborer, and I had to shovel dirt, and I went through various jobs progressively, and I, you know, I of course, pay is always important, but never, to me, it was never an issue of how I did my work. I don't think I ever slacked down just because I didn't get paid enough. I felt, you know, I'm being told to do a job, and I will do that job as best as I can. And if I get, you know, I have to take, if I want to get more pay, well, I had to improve myself. And that's what I did.
Absolutely.
So I went back to school, I went to university and everything. So I did, I bettered myself, but I don't think I ever used the excuse of low pay as not being, not performing according to expectations. Matter of fact, that's, I think, that integrity comes in there, is that you agree to work for compensation, and it is expected from you to do you the best to your ability. If you don't do that, then there's something wrong.
Right. You're in the wrong position.
Right.
That's absolutely a much healthier way of looking at this things. And I think it speaks to a climate we're seeing right now where people are a lot more entitled, and it's causing a lot of problems, because it's about what they expect for themselves and not actually making things better.
It's
not for the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Right. The common good has to be a prime focus for council. And if you kind of cheat that, then you not only cheat the public, but you cheat yourself as well.
Absolutely.
So let's be a little light for a second. I've been starting to talk to guests that we have on about what they like most about living in their ward. So I'm going to ask you about that in Ward 2. What do you like most about Ward 2? And also I'd like to learn more about this organization you work for when it comes to food insecurity. And the reason I'm interested in that is because one of the things I wanted to do as part of my campaign was to give back. So one of my events that we had to cancel was a food drive in each of our communities.
Okay, well, the first question is quite quite interesting, because I lived in the southwest, I lived in the northeast, and in the northwest. And the reason why I live in the northwest in Hartford is that you can see the mountains.
Right, I love it up here.
Yeah, I've got my. I just happen to have in a backyard that is, unfortunately, is located along John Laurie, but fortunately has a clear view of Canal Olympic Park with the mountains on the background. So we built a gazebo about 7 years ago. That when you're sitting there, you can in the morning you can have a morning coffee and see the mountains on the horizon, and it's a beautiful sight. It is a vista that is very peaceful, very relaxing. So yeah, I'm coming from the Netherlands, where it's probably one of the most populated countries in the world. This is so nice to see. Also, from my place to Banff, or to Bragg Creek, I have to negotiate one traffic light.
Yeah.
And then I'm out of the city. And
absolutely. Pretty close for me as well. I live in Tuscany, so it's 1 or 2 lights and you're out of town. But I completely have to agree as far as that. The mountains, especially on a clear day, unfortunately you can't see them today, as like we were saying before we went live here, if it rains anymore we'll have to build an ark. But unfortunately you're not able to see the mountains most of this week, but man, when you can, I just love it.
Yeah.
And then how about this organization you work for, working to battle food insecurity?
Okay, this is a Society of Saint Vincent de Paul. It is it originated in the Catholic Church about 175 years ago. There was a student in Paris named Frederick Ozanam who pontificated in his discussions about the plight of the poor, and his friends challenged him. He said, "Oh, Freddie, that's nice, but what are you going to do about it?" And he said, he thought about it, and he circulated his top hat, and people threw in some money, and from the money he helped some people, and from there he grew the concept of creating an organization that will encompass the world and will be dedicated to feed people. And that's now almost 75 years ago. And now in Calgary, we got about, I don't know, between 600 or 900 volunteers. And we get calls in from people that need help. And we make hampers, food hampers, and deliver the hampers to those people. And so that they are at least have something to eat. We are now linked with about another 45 organizations, with the various churches and the Muslim Food Bank and the Calgary Food Bank. So things are getting better organized, and so with that, we're looking at, there are 3 things that people need. There's food, clothing, and housing. If you don't have those 3, people cannot move up to the next level of being contributing member to society. So
absolutely,
the people that are working on that level are always going to be wards of society, and that's something we, as an Western society, cannot or should not accept. We have to help people along, and we have to do our best to get those people out of this rut. Now, will that happen? That's a long process. There are many ways of many thoughts about it, but at least we have to have the conscience. And one of the things that I found is that with the association in society, is that when you tell people about it, they're all willing to help out. So what good news maybe is worthwhile to note is one item of good news is that so as far as we can determine, there is no lack of food in Calgary. So if you take all those resources from the Calgary Food Bank and all the food banks around, there's no lack of food. The only thing was
it's
the only
just
thing was like,
distribution.
that's right, that's correct. So it's how to get it to the people. That is the main thing. So as a society, we have to have a social conscience of looking at the people that are that do not have it, and be very indiscriminative of helping. When people ask for help, that's our motto: is we help, no matter who it is, we help them.
So,
we don't set them away.
so I gotta tell you, Theo, this has been the one of my favorite parts of this conversation. I just love your commitment to community service. And what I find interesting is a lot of people, when they start talking to people like us that are more fiscally conservative, they automatically assume that we don't care about the rest of our community. We do. We absolutely care. We absolutely need to have a social conscience. But I think, like you said, grassroots and other organizations like that are much better suited to deliver the right kind of help than bureaucratic government programs.
And I was going to say that's exactly it. Unfortunately, there seems to be this idea that fiscal conservatism is synonymous for anti-social service, and it just isn't. At least I don't speak for every fiscal conservative, and I'm sure we don't either. But I mean, there's three of us in the room here, and all three of us, I consider myself a fiscal conservative, and I am all for social service. And like you said, when that social service makes sense and cannot be filled by the private sector, right? If there is no ability to fill that need from an organization outside of government, like you said, where bureaucrats aren't always best suited to be disseminating and helping people. Then that's the way it is, right? But unfortunately, but I do agree that there should not be this idea that it is synonymous with fiscal conservatism is synonymous with antisocial services. It just isn't correct, at least in my opinion, for more of the modern fiscal conservatives.
Yeah, I screwed this up in the interview with Daniel Smith, but I was going to quote Aristotle with the three essential pillars of society is beauty, justice, and truth, and those are essential for a civilized, functioning society. And so the city council is in the just area. They are supposed to be looking after what is the best for society, the just, and make sure that people are not being left behind. The news media, they should be concerned about the truth. Well, they have still some work to do.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
But those are kind of fundamentals that I think we should keep focus on. Is that we are not here for ourselves. We are for others. We have to look at the greater good for the society, and see how we get there. And that's why I think when things coming up, like for instance, we had a long discussion on the next door about fluorization of fluoride added into water. Well, there's $20 million. You can give housing to 120 people per year for that amount, for the 1% water that's being consumed by people, and that is only 25% effective. So, I mean, and that's where I'm getting at when you make decisions. When you look at something and you scale it out and you got the amount of money, what are the alternatives? What can you do, or are you willing not to do by spending that money? So I think there's a kind of an important moral way of looking at things when spending money. You say, okay, is this the best way of spending money that benefits society? And that's that kind of discussion needs to take place, I think.
Theo, I like the way you think, my friend. I think we could talk about policy and the sort of political philosophy. I was a political science major in university, so these sorts of political philosophy things are right up my alley. So, I very much hope that we can be, if you're successful, we can be colleagues come the fall.
Yeah.
And this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. It's about time where we need to start wrapping up. So I'm gonna say, if there was one thing you wanted people to take away from your campaign, and I think we may have already heard it, but if there's one thing you wanted people to take away from what you're doing, what would it be?
It would be, please, sniff out the candidates. Make sure this time that you make a very informed decision, that you pick out the candidate that resonates with your thought process, with your beliefs, and that you can trust. So you only get this democratic chance once in the 4 years. It is never. I don't think it's ever been so important as this year to get a slate of councillors that are willing to pull this whole works in the right direction. If this fails, then we're all in it together. To quote Dr. Dina Hinshaw, we're all in it together, and that's not, and it could be the bad way. Just have a visit to Detroit.
Absolutely. Vote, and vote as an informed voter, everybody. I know it seems like the election is still very far away, but it's getting closer and closer every day, and every time we have one of these shows. So I'm going to remind you again to vote. If you're in Ward 1, I'll cross my fingers and say hopefully for me, but even if you don't vote for me, make an informed choice and vote for sure. I will also say, get your vaccination and let's get back to normal as soon as we can. And Jason, do you have any closing thoughts?
I wanted to say thank you so much, Theo, for joining us today. You are an absolute insight, and again, thank you so much for what you do for the community. It was awesome talking about the initiatives that you're a part of, and exactly. Get vaccinated, vote, do your research, right? We are now in this epoch of time where things have slowed down tremendously, albeit for the wrong reasons, but things have slowed down tremendously. We all do things a little bit more remotely and have just a touch more time on our hands. Let's try and take that time and really do something amazing for this city. Research your candidates, see who will best serve you and the greater good, as we've all talked about here today, gentlemen. And let's turn Calgary, into the best Calgary it can possibly be, as we've always said on this show.
And then, as always, if you want to reach out to me or suggest questions for a future episode, you can find me on social media at Jacob for Ward 1 or on jacobforward1.ca. Theo, do you want to mention your website real quick before we go?
I think it's Theo Ward 2. It's all spelled out. It's TheoWardTwo at .com. Yeah, .ca. Yeah, so it's on the city website. So
yeah. And thank you very much, sir. If you're willing, we'd love to have you on again, I think. And that's another episode of Your Neck of the Woods. Thanks for listening, everybody.